Okay, welcome everybody. It's great to see, or maybe not to see, depending upon whether you've shown your screen or not, but it's great to see you all. My name is David Kramer. I am director of the library at the Jewish Theological Seminary. And for those of you who have been with us before, you know that I always begin this by saying something like, it is my great privilege, and it truly is my great privilege, to be able to sponsor on behalf of the library these talks about books of Jewish interest that are notable and amazing and challenging and all kinds of other things. And in the case of the book we're going to be exposed to tonight, all of those things in different ways are true. I don't know if it's true for those of you who are listening, but I think I remember well when the transition came in my appreciation of graphic books, what would once, I think, have been called comic books in a way. Of course, Mouse, which is now with us for many years, changed our view of what a graphic book could do. But we hired a librarian for the library a number of years ago who was very devoted to graphic novels, graphic books of various sorts, and encouraged us to begin acquisitions, to develop a collection in this connection. And as I saw those books coming into the library and dove into them more and more, I came to appreciate how serious these seemingly lighter books could be. And that is certainly the case with the volume that we are going to hear about tonight, When I Grow Up. This is a book which brings to life something that might easily have been lost, something that is at the same time both mundane and precious. It's about the life of teenagers, common Jewish teenagers before the war in Europe. They contributed autobiographical essays as a result of a, kind of a challenge, a contest, and these were preserved, and they have now been brought out literally in front of our eyes by Ken Krimstein. And I think that when you see the pages of this, the images that tell these stories, you will agree how eye-opening this is. When I say it's about the common life, it's both about the common and complex of being a Jew during that time, but it's also about being a teenager. So of the stories that are gathered here, one is called The Letter Writer, one is called The Boy Who Liked a Girl, another is The Skater. You can tell that at the same time, these are common stories, but they are also stories that portray to us the life of real Jews in a real world that was destroyed, and it's priceless that we're able to regain a view of it from this book. So I will introduce Ken momentarily. I hear some background noise, so this provides me with the opportunity to say that I am going to be very aggressive about putting people on mute. If you stray off of mute, please do your best to stay on mute so that our audio isn't interrupted. This is being recorded, so please be aware of that. And I am going to, as we begin in a moment, spotlight the author, Ken Krimstein, and so you will see him and his shared screen. If you have questions or comments, please put them into chat and I will gather them together, and there will be time for questions and discussion at the end. But in the meantime, we'll just begin accumulating those so that we've got a record and some time for me, at least, to organize them so that I can share them with Ken when he's finished with his presentation. So the author is a cartoonist and a writer, award-winning with significant books already published and others he told me about that are on the way. But we're here not to recount his accomplishments, but to focus on a very particular accomplishment. So Ken, thank you so much for being here. And I am going to spotlight you now, and the screen and the microphone are yours, please.
Well, thank you. Thanks very much, David. And it really is an honor to be speaking to you via the library at the Jewish Theological Seminary, via my studio here in Chicago, where I'm living now, although I lived on 105th Street in West End for about 30 years. And I'll just let you know, a little weather report, it's warmed up to 9 degrees. So we're feeling very warm here. But this is a real honor, and I'm going to go through a presentation, as David said, really, when the question time comes, or discussion, however he wants to handle it, because this material has proven to be pretty evocative for a lot of people. The book came out a few months ago, and it's been quite a journey for me as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and walk you through a presentation so you can get a sample of it and some of the background on how I made it. I will say it is an interesting moment in many ways for the graphic narrative or the graphic book, sort of the second or third generation. Yes, Spiegelman Maus is the father of us all in many ways, although I would go further back to Mad Magazine and Harvey Kurtzman. Oh, another Landsman there. Anyways, that's another talk that I'm sure you guys have given before. So here we go. Let me try and share the screen. Okay.
Okay, we can see it. That's great.
So you can see it.
Yes.
Okay. So this is the cover of the book. When I Grow Up, the Lost Autobiographies of 6 Yiddish Teenagers. And you can see the Yiddish writing, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the composition of the book, but I'd like to just give you a sense of how I dive into it in the beginning. It's a slight adaptation of the initial couple of pages. And I'm actually my screen is a little bit messed up there, so I'm going to read it from in the late summer of 2018, I held a miracle in my hands, a student notebook. Its paper was unblemished, and the writing, though indecipherable to me, was inked as crisply as if it had been written that afternoon, except that it hadn't. The pages I'd flown halfway around the world to see had been jotted down more than 80 years earlier. In fact, the only evidence of the notebook's age and its journey from being hidden twice, lost once, and finally unearthed just a year before I came across it were 3 rusty shards that had once been staples, blood red splinters ever so slightly staining irregular halos. And that's my hand holding one of the actual books there. Here's another one. Question, I said to the archivist at the Martynas Mažvydas National Library of Lithuania. How many people have flipped through this notebook since 1939? 2, she said, you and me. Catching my breath, I turned another page. Welcome to Lithuania, where according to Max Weinreich, who was the founder of YIVO, in the 1930s, Yiddish is the native language of about 8 million people. And you can see a little map that I concocted of this area that I call Lithuania, which basically extends from Riga down to the Crimea and past Warsaw and east. Vilna, uncrowned capital of Lithuania, the largest, most concentrated Jewish population the world has ever seen, almost 9 million people, poets, mystics, criminals, scientists, musicians, taxi drivers, firemen, pork eaters, and yes, even cartoonists. So here's a couple of examples of some chapters, very, just to give you a taste of it. David had mentioned, some of the various titles, and I had gone there to explore these anonymous autobiographies, which we can talk more about, that were put together for a ethnographic contest. And I saw them as source material, and I picked 6 of them. So this is the one that actually is the last one in the book. I call her the skater because I don't know her name, because they did them anonymously, because they had enough sechel to know that if you had told a teenager to tell the full truth about their life, but they were going to put their name on there, they wouldn't tell the whole truth because their parents might find out. 19-year-old girl. So I start, this is the spread, and you can, I've traced her handwriting in Yiddish, and then you can see it morphs into kind of a visual of her getting ready to skate. For the past year, I've been looking after a rich woman's kids in the big city. Let me begin by saying I'm prone to exaggeration. 3 weeks ago, I thought that if only my sister would send me a pair of ice skates, I would know that I was a truly lucky person. And she did. Whoops. Advance. My screen has frozen. Sorry. Oh, there it goes. The postman. Big package from Warsaw. And you can see she's got her X-ray specs. She can see the skates. Such warm currents are flowing through me. The flame, the fire compels me to express myself fully, to write. All week, I look forward to Friday evening when I'm finally free to run to the rink. As I skate, the thoughts flood in. I see my adorable baby brother lying in bed, sick, a sad smile. I'm 9, doctors crowd our house. He would have grown to be such a splendid boy, dressed in a sharp sport coat with a crisp, wide collar. I would so love to have him with me now. I've never really believed in God, but at that moment I prayed, if you let him live, I will believe in you. So you can see, and the story continues with her reminiscences of her life, and she loves to skate. So that's how I chose to dramatize her story. And this is the one just before her, and it's slightly different, and we can relate to it. The boy who liked a girl. And he was 20 years old. And this one came in the summer of 1939. And we can talk a little bit about the timing of the contest. But this is an excerpt from chapter 5. So there's his girl, and that's my interpretation of his Yiddish handwriting. And there he is. It took a long time for me to get used to listening to M talk. They had to abbreviate names, so you couldn't know who they were. To get used to listening to M talk. But I finally figured out how to be both interested and not interested at the same time. I just answer 1 word in 10. That seemed to work. And amazingly, as I started to get to know her better, I started to like her. M's character was what I can only describe as noble. And she was beautiful, so beautiful. M and I often went out into the woods. Everybody hung out there. You can see him approaching her in the woods there. Little smooch. No question, M and I developed a relationship that could have become something truly important. But something happened that tore us apart and led us to forget about each other for a long, long time. So that just gives you a flavor. And, these were written in Yiddish and handwriting and notebooks, and I'll show you. And I had to find someone to help me by translating them, because I can't read Yiddish, much less from that era. I mean, it's very, very clumsy for me. And their words were coming through. And part of my process for doing this was I had to get to Vilnius. I had to go there. I had to experience the town. And, interestingly, I found out, of course, after I came back and did the book, my mom said, your great grandmother, came from Vilnius. Oh, thanks, Mom. But in any case, let me show you a little bit of the source material and how I was going about researching the story. So here I am in my studio working, the light box. You can see a little bit how how I do that. These are the actual pages. I took photographs of them when I was in the library. And so there's a lot of story to this, but when these were discovered, and I had a piece in the New York Times Book Review about it a while ago, but a lot of these were unearthed in 2017 when they were cleaning out an old church in Vilnius that had been a repository for Soviet books for the elite, that Huck Finn and things like that people weren't supposed to be able to read. And when they cleaned it out under piles of Pravda magazine, Pravda newspapers, and stuffed into organ pipes, they found 180,000 pages that actually I was going to give a little shout out here to the theological seminary, because this book, The Book Smugglers, written by a professor there, really outlines a lot about how these documents were saved. But these are them. I mean, these are photographs of them. And when I talk about rusty staples, you can see that, or paper clips. And, as an archivist, as somebody going into an archive, it was just stunning, because paper really preserves, and metal and all this other stuff goes away. And look at the handwriting. I mean, each one is a person, it's a character. As an artist myself, I love handwriting. I love how it characterizes. And there are the books that's sitting on the desk. And I have to say, the Lithuanian government and their national library and the librarian there have done a tremendous job in protecting and preserving these. There's an entire Jewish archive there. So there they are. And when I went there, I'm like, where are they? And they said, there. That I thought they were just like normal books. I said, there, take a look at them. I was knocked out. Here are some more pages. You can see this one on the left. The person, although when they made the rules, they said no prizes will be given for flowery language. They were really like, come on, just tell us the facts. So they tried to write, and many of them wrote very, very, beautifully. But you can see this one on the left, he tried to make his handwriting look very fancy. And you can see it says Warsaw in 1937. And the one on the right was part of a very, very lengthy one that I translated, or had translated. But I was struck again, I'm experiencing anonymous people through their handwriting, teenagers. And even if you can't read Hebrew or Yiddish, you can look at that and you can see, look at how beautiful the block lettering is at the top of that, and how the pen writes the number 3. They're going, from right to left, and just, you don't even have to understand it to get a sense of that person's character. And here's some more. So everyone, now that one on the left, you can see the stamp from Yivo, and it's numbered. So they documented these. They marked them. They were going to do a very big study to find out what is going to be the future of our civilization here. And it just struck me when I heard about these, that this is a window into a civilization that I just did not know enough about. I just didn't know enough about it. And you can just see the variety of handwriting. And there, that one, you can see the staples have gone all rusty, but the handwriting looks like it was done this afternoon in the paper. So, they helped me, and we'd lay them out, and they'd give me a little bit of a, overview, because I was saying, I want to get a diversity to capture what I felt was the diversity of this culture. I want urban, I want rural, I want, very observant, I want not so much observant, I want boys, I want girls, and we were digging through, and I needed them to be complete. There were a lot of things that I had to put into it. So you can see that. So here, that was that one, that Warsaw one. And I actually then I did a drawing. I was so kind of like moved to be in the presence of this book that I could just be near, that I felt I had to draw it. And you can see I just did a rendition of it. And I had a lot of fun throughout the book, tracing or drawing or replicating the Hebrew Yiddish writing. It's so fantastic and fanciful to me. So yeah, part of the journey, in the research, I'll say this, finding Vilna. So I don't know how many of you have been to Vilnius. Fascinating city. So I had old maps, you know, from the old days. I used Lucy Davidovich did this incredible book called From That Place and Time. And she became a very, very distinguished, you know, historian and writer. But when I got the book, you can see on the inside flaps, she had a map of Vilna in 1939. So I used it to help me find my way around, and I had to figure out what streets were which. So here you can see that's a street that's leading, that green area there is where the great synagogue was, and the Gaon of Vilna's synagogue and things like that. And walking around town, we had a guide, and you can see my wife hand there pointing. The guide would show us, see that this is exactly that street. You can see the little picture there. And there's still remnants of buildings that have Yiddish writing on them, amazingly. See on the right. So this is a watercolor that I did of the street there that led to where the great synagogue was. And then this is a shot of the street. You know, there's a photograph of it and my sketch of it, which exists in the book. And they call that Jiddu Zadve. And David, I'm sorry, since I'm a bit of a book freak and this is a book talk, I know I'm small here, but this is a book that I found there.
It's great. Show more books. It's always
yeah. Well, this is one, if you guys don't have this in your library, which I'm sure you do, you should get it. It's called Houses That Talk, Everyday Life in Jiddu Street, which is Yiddish street.
Mm-hmm.
And what this book does is it takes every single house, here's the map, that was in that area, and it tells you like who lived there and what was going on. I mean, it's an incredible, incredible book. So I used that too, and I discovered so many things, and I'm a big library person. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about libraries too. So this is the street, you know, before the war, before the destruction, Jiddu Street. And you can see on the right, two very important buildings. If you look at that photograph, the one that has the little arches, that was the Strashun Library. And this place, I think, was unprecedented in Eastern Europe. It was a library, private library that was open to everybody. And evidently, you know, amidst all the cigarette smoke, you probably needed to wear a gas mask to get in there. You'd have a Hasidic rabbi sitting next to a young woman in a skirt, sitting next to a banker, sitting next to and they're all reading. And behind that, the very, very tall building that's arched, that's the Great Synagogue, which you can see a photograph of it on the right. And it had massive pillars, and it was sunken underground a little bit, evidently. And here's a picture of my wife, and they're excavating it. They've actually found bits of it. The Soviets put a kindergarten over it, but somebody was like, "Hey, what are all these little tiles and stuff on the floor?" So they've shut the kindergarten down, and they're actually excavating. And I think that may even be part of the mikvah. I don't know. I mean, it's we as you can see, our guide kind of talked to the garden. We went beyond the little yellow rope there. And so I did a fanciful drawing of, that's the kindergarten. So the next part that I have to do when I'm doing this is I have to figure out what the characters look like, the faces. And these were anonymous. So they're, you know, for the most part, we don't have any photographs of who these people were. But there's thankfully, a fair amount of visual representation. I got a lot of it there and through the internet. So here's and you have to understand, I'm trying to portray these people as a historian without using any of my knowledge of what happened. I want to just show them at their moment in time. And I'm going to let the reader, the viewer, complete the equation and make whatever analysis of it that they want. To be true to these people, you know, and we can talk a little bit more about it, but I You know, I lived in New York during 9/11, and I remember 9/10 very well. It was a beautiful day. I remember 9/11 very well when I went to work that morning. It's a gorgeous day. Then all of a sudden, this was 9/10, 2001. So here they are at a school doing crazy exercises. And I thought, that's peculiar. And I'm just trying to capture their world. Obviously heartbreaking to see, but you know, I'm trying to get a sense of who these people were. And here they are in schools, sort of stern teachers, boys, girls. And then I have to figure out, because I have 6, I've narrowed it. I've had 9 or 10 translated, and I've narrowed it to, you know, 6 or 7 that I'm working on. And they all have, I can tell from reading their narratives, you know, kind of their lives, who their characters are. And I have to find inspiration for people of the time that would be like them. So then I had to find photographs. And you can see this one here, funny stories. I had circled that guy. Lost father. And I was trying to figure out who could be characters for these. This actually, the photo on on the left there is my great aunt, my Aunt Esther. She did not live there. She lived in Chicago. But she was of that era. And I use this to help me figure out what girls looked like at that time, and what their hair was like. Here you can see some guys and some color footage. So I was trying to get a sense of what was it like to just be a teenager, which they didn't even call teenagers in those days. They called them youth. You know, the word teenager wasn't even invented, I don't think, until, you know, Madison Avenue came up with it in the 1950s, but they were youth. And then in the book, you know, slight spoiler alert, but this is one that kind of tipped me off to it. One kid kind of, I call her the rule breaker, and she sort of put her picture in and her name and everything. So I had one to kind of go on. And then you can see this is my actual 12/6, you know, 12/11 of 19. So now I'm starting to, and I'm drawing them over and over and over again and trying to give them a character that you can refer to. You know, I often say, you know, Charles Schultz, you know, who did Charlie Brown, you know, is a genius. But Charlie Brown was always the same age. You know, you never, you know, and you kind of knew what he looked like. I had to figure out who these people were in this time. So you can see me identifying them. And they're in the one number one, Beba, that's the one who we had known. So you can see I'm even trying to abstract her image. Okay, making the pages. So here you can see I called this girl the 8th daughter, and that's sort of the one that I start the book out with. And it's an interesting story. And she, you know, one of the things that attracted me to it is the first sentence. The first sentence in her autobiography is, I was the 8th daughter. And I immediately was like, I got to do that. Like, what a, you know, I have one daughter, and that's plenty. You know, 8. So, and here her father was a kosher butcher. And so I tried doing a drawing there of her describing, you know, her mom and her dad and her sisters in front of you can see there's a duck, you know. I thought that was interesting too, that, you know, it was kosher duck, not a chicken at the, you know, and that was source material. I ended up not using that drawing to start it. I found another one that I came up with another one that I thought was more striking, but that's how you do it. And there's her father, right? And he's pretty busy. And so, you know, with graphic novels, with visual, you can abstract the image if it helps push the story forward. So, you know, I got this. She said my father was very, very busy. He was the only kosher butcher in our area. So I showed him with his hands going all over the place. And she says, but he always found time for me. She says that. And here you can see how I like sketch it out in black and white. And her father loved to read. He was a big fan of the Yiddish writers like Peretz and Sforum, and he even mentions he was a fan of Peretz. And I had to figure out how to dramatize this. And on the right is one of the ones that I started out with, where she talks about her grandparents. Here's another example of how you, as I was saying, you can sometimes use visuals to help push the story ahead. So this is, I think this is the boy who liked a girl. And part of the story is he kind of gets recruited, enticed to go join a Musar yeshiva. There's another shout out, another book here, David. They're all over. This is a book I found called Lithuanian Yeshivas of the 19th Century. It's a fabulous book. It's a super interesting topic.
Excellent book. Yes.
Shaul Stampfer. You're familiar with it. I mean, tremendous. So as I'm doing the research, I want to find out, not only what kind of a yeshiva this was, but where it might have been. And I knew that it was in Bialystok, or in the area of Bialystok, Belsk. So I could look it up, and I found out about it. But the thing about this teen boy, and you're channeling teenagers, he's kind of a ruffian. I mean, he's kind of he likes this girl. He wants to get away from his father, and he meets a yeshiva bacher, teacher, in the woods when he's walking around, because he's feeling very sad about his girlfriend, because she went to a very progressive socialist Jewish school on the other side of town. He's missing her. And the bacher says, "Oh, you could be free. You could be free. Come to my yeshiva and we'll pay." So he goes. These are his words. I don't even have to, it's incredible. So he goes there, and all of a sudden he's putting on tefillin, and he's starting to say prayers, and he's all happy. He's like, "The bacher gave me tefillin in the past. When I was forced to daven, my mind would wander, but now everything else vanished." And he says, "I was a born yeshiva bacher." I mean, he's a teen. He's so into it. Well, before long, and this is his story, before long, it's not everything that he thought it was going to be. But I thought, wow, this would be interesting to kind of show the straps of the tefillin helping to get the story across. Okay, come on, wake up. This thing's sometimes a bit slow on the Zoom. Hold on. Come on. Move ahead. Ooh, freezing up. Forgive me while
it'll follow.
It moved before. Hold on. I'm gonna have to. I don't know why it's. Oh, could it be? There we go. So here you can see. Then the pages. I used one color. I used orange. This is the letter writer, and you can see I thought, oh well, I'll have stamps help push along the narration. So you can see how the pages lay out. And yes, there were cartoonists. When I wrote the introduction, I said, oh, and there were even cartoonists in Lithuania. And of course, I wasn't quite sure of that. I mean, I sort of knew, because Eddie Portnoy kind of tipped me off to the fact, and I know. But subsequently, I found out there were a lot of cartoonists in this civilization. And here are just some examples of, from some of the press. I mean, this one on the left is, all the different kinds of Jews fighting with each other, in Warsaw. Never heard of that. And on the right, something to do with marital problems. This one in the upper left, these were cartoons that ran. There were humorous magazines. There were newspapers. I mean, there was a lot. I mean, the Forward it was a global paper. I mean, they would write it in New York and telegraph the copy to Warsaw and back and forth. Here's this one on the left is a wife saying, "These are the 10 commandments for my husband when I go up to the mountains in the summer." These were more political. So I'm just trying to inhabit this world, right? So this one on the right is from 1932. Hitler. So the Jews there knew Hindenburg was like riding this fat Hitler. I mean, this image. So I'm learning. Here's some illustrations that look almost as if they could have come right out of the New Yorker by a Lithuanian Jewish writer cartoonist at the same time. And this one really struck me. This was in one of the diaries. And I thought to myself, this young woman could have been a cartoonist. She could maybe. Look at that drawing. I was taken by it. And an interesting thing that somebody pointed out to me over there was the writing is in Yiddish in the text, but the writing in the book is in Hebrew. I mean, it's very subtle and very beautifully drawn. So as I was learning about this, I was also learning about myself and my own journey. Um, and I've done a little bit of work on it. And I found that my family, comes from, well, I found Vilna and, all the usual suspects, Berdichev down in the Ukraine, Minsk, places like that. And they made the journey to what was the west side of Chicago, which Douglas Park. And I found out that before the war, there were almost 160,000 Jews living in this area. And I went down there. It was incredible. I mean, there was a YIVO, there was all this stuff. So I was thinking about collapsing this, because this is a moment that I wasn't really aware of. Here's some photographs. This is not Vilna. This is not Warsaw. This is Chicago. Yiddish look at all the Yiddish papers. Look the way the man looks. There you can see People's Kosher meat market. That's Chicago in the 20s and 30s. My mom was a little kid at this time. I mean, there's a matzah bakery. There's the Chicago Federation or whatever, the Chicago Hebrew Academy. I mean, and I was looking at photographs of these teens in Vilna or in Krakow or wherever, and Chicago, and I was thinking, these are the same people. These are the same. I mean, it really, there were so many times that the geography collapsed. I mean, these were the schools that my parents went to, and they looked just like those pictures I showed you of the kids in the beginning. And, I'm very lucky that none of my immediate family were there at the time, but all of a sudden I was just made aware of this. And even Yiddish culture. I mean, here's a poster from Glickman's Palace on Roosevelt Road featuring the Vilna troupe, which came to visit and play in Hebrew and put on Hard to Be a Jew, which is a trope and a tone that I use over and over again, in the book. So that's how you can find me. And that's what I got visually here. Let me stop the share if I can. And did I stop the share? Yeah.
Yes.
Here we are. Hi.
Good.
Hi.
May I speak?
Okay. I actually, if you'll hold back for a moment, there were comments which came into the chat, and I wanted to take those first. So why don't we do that? And then if there are comments, I'll invite people to take themselves off of mute. So first of all, I want to draw people's attention to the fact that you get a unique fringe benefit by watching a presentation like this as sponsored by the Library of JTS, because as you mentioned books, Ken, my colleague from the library, Naomi Steinberger, actually gave people this precise notations for how they could find the book. So you got.
I can get Naomi really going if she wants. Here's the golden tradition. No, I'm a big book person, and
That's great.
I told you I really want to get there. But yes, you should go.
There the couple of people who recorded in the chat, you began by saying that by and large the authors of these essays are unknown, although you did indicate that the rule breaker broke the rule and included the name and a photo. Since publishing the book, or somehow in the process of the book, do you know whether any of these individuals survives? Has anybody been in touch with you, or is all of this lost to history and the tragedy?
Well, before I published the book, I tried to find out, and there was scant names, last names. There were very, very few. I mean, in one of the stories, I think it was the skater, she mentions Herschel Goldmacher. So I started to go through all of the, Yad Vashem and on the thing and Jewish. I was trying to find a Herschel Goldmacher that lived in that area. And I thought I could, but I couldn't. I just, no, nobody has come forth, and a lot of them, uh, some of them were just, there's no way of tracing them. I was uh, you know, they really, I mean, they weren't even supposed to mention, the rules stipulated you, because they wanted it to be so anonymous. They had a coded way, but you can't even mention the name of the town. You can't mention the name of anybody in it. So no, not.
Um, Well, I just have to tell you, Lori just commented. She says, imagine my surprise when I saw the name Beba from Vilna. I knew one Beba from Vilna, Beba Leventhal, the mother of my good friend. And it turns
That's her.
out that
That's
she's the
her.
very same one.
That's her. Michael Leventhal. So, you can look up, I was very fortunate that the CBS morning show did a little clip. If you look at my website, and Michael Leventhal actually speaks, and the story of that is incredible. And one of the things that really sent me on this journey was when I spoke to Michael Leventhal on the phone in California
Oh,
before I did
oh.
this.
That's great. Lori, thank you for adding that. Someone spoke up before, and since there are no more comments in the chat, whoever you were, please feel free to unmute and make your comment or ask your question.
Well, now that the book it's been more publicized, is it possible, because of the publicity, that some of the people in the book will come forward, or some relative, and we'll know more about it, and we'll know if any of them survived?
I hope so. I hope so. One thing I will add is, I believe, I think we're all friends here. I think YIVO has just announced that a large part of this collection has been digitized. So I think you can, I haven't really dove into it on the online thing yet, but if you have the wherewithal, I believe you could probably go look at the original documents in Yiddish and see.
Yeah, I mean, I love, Ken, the way you draw attention to the handwriting. The way the writers, teenagers, wrote, and personalities really do come through that way. Whenever we show manuscripts at the library, we try to draw attention to the fact that writing words is not merely writing words. It captures personalities and energies and all kinds of things.
Yeah, it was quite extraordinary. So many layers of this. So what was Yiddishwanian or world civilization? Let's talk about Yiddishwanian civilization in the 1930s. They read a lot. There was no internet, surprisingly. There was barely radio, but there was movies. They would go see, Clark Gable. Not all of them. Some kids got in trouble for going to the movies. They listened to records. In one of the stories, the kid's getting bar mitzvah, and his cousin comes over from New York, and she brings records, and they dance. And the things that got me, first of all, it's not that long ago, but it is really long ago. And one of the things that's kind of incredible about this moment in time is I'm sort of getting the sense that the Holocaust show or whatever, which is sort of a almost a current thing. Like, we're still sort of, there are people who are kind of still, the people who are adults are going, but pretty soon, not in the not too distant future, it's going to be a completely historical event.
Right.
And that has made it a very charged time. And also, a lot of stuff is being found.
Mm-hmm.
And, I wouldn't be surprised if they found more stuff, because the paper brigade buried things all over the place to keep it. And as these things come forward, narratives are being revised, or not revised, but being, so it was an incredible, so they were readers, they were, and then as a historian or somebody trying to tell this story, then you have to say, well, the people who did this, and a lot of them write about it, there was a self-selection process. Like, they were either, all my friends say I can write, but I loved just, I was a teenager. I have raised teenagers. I know teenagers. There's something charming about that. I taught college kids. you know,
Yeah.
they think they're immortal, and they will. There's a great quote, I read from a book about the Beatles, and the guy says, teenagers will make their own fun. I mean, and this was a window into this world. And I felt, first of all, for so many reasons, I couldn't deal with the aftermath, but this actually connected to me, and they talked about things that I didn't know. And one of the things that I do when I do these books, and I hope you guys will like it, is you learn, like tango music. I did not know that tango music was pretty much invented by Jews in Warsaw and then transported to Jews in Argentina and then made a popular, not surprising. I mean, not completely. I mean, maybe there were some people on the Pampas playing something that sounded like tango music, but it was huge. There was a record label called Sirena. I don't know if do you have records and stuff
We
at your
do. I
library?
don't know if we have that. Maybe.
I mean, it's Sirena Records was a Yiddish record label, and it popularized tango music, and it was
Wow.
huge. There were a lot of tango bands. I mean, so I was taken by this, and the handwriting. Yeah, I mean, in one of the things, the kid says, the old joke, today I am a fountain pen, because everybody got fountain pen. They all had fountain pens. I mean, some wrote with pencils, the handwriting could be beautiful. It could be, messy. I mean, I did my first long form graphic narrative was about Hannah Arendt. And I was completely taken by an incident in her life where handwriting analysis played in. And I, like, as is my wont, I dug down to find out graphology. Well, guess what? It was a big Jewish phenomenon. I mean, the people who taught handwriting analysis to standing room only classes at the New School were Hungarian Jewish refugees.
I think
Because
everyone
they're
who taught at the
people
New School was a Hungarian Jewish refugee. Isn't that true? Just kidding.
Well, there were a lot.
I think everyone who taught at the New School.
Oh, yeah. Well, and they were all standing room only. So
Yeah.
the classes. But graphology, the personality. So yeah, you're right. It's, and then there's the fact that they're anonymous and they're telling the truth, and the discoveries. I mean, the $25 word, quotidian, the day-to-day boring stuff of their life. I wanted to have a date. I like this girl. That's what made them real. And when you start reading some of the Yiddish literature, and I started getting into reading a lot of Peretz. Well, first of all, I was completely blown away by, I'm reading it in translation. Hopefully someday I'll be able to read it but the sophistication and of that. But Peretz, somewhere he says, we don't want your pity. And he died in 1915, long before this, but he was talking about a lot of the same phenomena.
Yeah.
So I just felt compelled. Looks like there may be another question. I'm not sure.
Well, there are others. Yeah. I mean, first of all, the same question. Is this the first project that you've done that it has a specifically Jewish focus? And then you mentioned to me that this Yiddishowani is your own neologism. So, I mean, have you shared it with others? Have others responded? Historians, rabbis? Where is this word going to go?
Not only
will it be added to the dictionary?
Yeah, if I can get a nickel for it every time they cite it. No, yeah, I made it up because people have referred to this civilization in many ways. I call it a civilization because I do believe it is a civilization. The way that the de facto it has been called Yiddish land, and there was some wonderful books, I think, but I just couldn't wrap my head around that. No disrespect to anybody who ever used it, but it reminded me too much of Disneyland. I just couldn't, so I felt I wanted to come up with another way of describing it. It's just, and it's a little humorous because, all those countries there seem to sound like they all end in Ewania or whatever. But, I was talking to Jonathan Brent, who's the current head of YIVO, and we were talking about this civilization, which I've done. And he was actually saying to me, he thinks that culture was like not a Renaissance, but the Renaissance. It's like right up with the Italian Renaissance. Obviously, he's slightly biased, but if you look at, you start reading, you look at Chaim Grada, you look at the range of thought, all the way from people on the right, and in the book I reflect it, because there were all these political groups, you have some people who were super far on the right, this is what we're going to do, we're going to go, and then you had people who said, we're going to have kibbutzim in Poland, let's figure out how to have, let's figure out. So I was just blown away. I was blown away by it. Yeah.
That's
so
great.
I kind of did.
And what about, and have you had other projects with the Jewish focus, or is this the one?
Well, I've kind of fallen into this Middle European rabbit hole of, so the Hannah, although not explicitly Jewish, does the world that she came up in. I was struck by how many intellectuals and thinkers and scholars in that world were Jewish. And again, I learn about it, and the scene in Weimar, Germany was everybody from Hannah Hoke, who was a pioneering collage artist, to many of the filmmakers who went to Hollywood and defined cinema. Then there's this book, which was, obviously very much of a Jewish focus, but also a historical and teenage focus. And then the next one I'm working on, I'm interested in it from both maybe a way that it interacts with the greater culture. And it's something about Albert Einstein and Kafka and the year that they spent together, or kind of rubbed shoulders in Prague. So it's definitely, an interest. I'm kind of hoping that my fourth book will be about maybe swimmers in the Olympics or something like that. Which, well, there is a Jew in there too, so I can't.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can't escape.
I had stamped. They're not. Maybe. Yeah, no, you can't get away from it. You write what you know. I don't know.
That's great. I'm just curious. Do you know, is anybody working on a project to translate and publish these stories? Since, I mean, what you've chosen is a very small selection, and of course you represent it not in their words for the most part, but in images. So do you know anything about that?
Yeah, well, interestingly, and on the Yiddishland thing, there was a book, because this is probably more detailed, but the Nazis transported much of this material to Frankfurt, and when the monuments men came in, they took a lot of the material from that period went to YIVO in New York. So some of this stuff had been in the archives there, and there's a scholar historian named Jeffrey Chandler from Yale. I think he's at Yale, or he was, and he did. I didn't even know about this. This was a long time ago. I think I saw the book at the Strand or something, and I got it for my daughter. He translated some of them. And they were full on, lengthy, and very interesting. And I got a lot of, in fact, Jeffrey and I talked. I don't know. I don't know. If you have some Yiddishists there at the school, I mean, it might be an interesting
because it's a tremendous resource. And
I've got dibs on a couple. I mean, I had one translated that was 125 pages. By the way, the rules stipulated they had to be under 25 pages long. This guy came in with one that was 125 pages, but it was so fascinating that I had the whole thing translated and tried drawing it up, and I realized it was just too massive of a story to put in.
Yeah. And had winners of these contests been identified?
Well, this is one of the great ironies, and there were so many. So there were 3 waves of the contest through the 1930s, and more than 700 submissions came in. The grand prize for the largest one, and now the prize was 150 zlotys, which in 1930s money, I have pretty much seen that you could probably rent an apartment, a small apartment in Warsaw for a year for that. So it was not insignificant.
Mm-hmm.
It was not insignificant. So a lot of these kids, wanted it for the money, but this was just, when you're doing the grand prize was to be awarded on September 1st, 1939. And I just got a lump in my throat. It was just another one of those moments where, of course, that was the day the Nazis invaded, and no prizes were awarded, and all the material vanished.
Oh, wow. Where would you recommend, what's your favorite bookseller? Where would you recommend people purchase copies of the book?
Anywhere. No. I like to support independent bookstores, and I don't know where your readers are located, but I remember when I lived on the Upper West Side, I really liked Book Culture. I think that's a nice store. The Strand has always been kind of a cool place. God knows what's going to happen to them.
A good bookstore is what you're looking for.
Any bookstore, seriously. I mean, I don't know what it is about bookstores, but yeah, I mean, anyone you can find.
Okay, there you go. So this is the book. As you know, I have to tell you, Ken, my only complaint about the book is that it doesn't take long enough to read. Right. I wanted to spend more time with it.
Well, you're a librarian. You can read fast. But a friend of mine once told me there's a distinct pleasure that you can get from reading something more than once. And if I could tell you the issues of Classics Illustrated comics that I got from my great uncle, I've read 1,000 times. So comics just get better every time.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you for being on our list. We will be in touch with you. First of all, this has been recorded and it'll be available on the JTS website. So anybody you want to share it with, we will draw your attention to that after the fact. And just be well and come back for other book talks because we've got a lot of programming. Have a good night. And thank you, Ken.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Bye-bye.
Wonderful program.